Morning and afternoon and evening to everybody. Welcome to day 3 in our week-long series of CTO interviews. I am Danica Tormolin, I'm going to be joining SISO as content director, publisher, and editor-in-chief officially on January 1. I want to kick off today's event by thanking Juno for supporting this thought leadership discussion with tech execs who work at some of the largest independent show organizers in the world. And if you're not familiar with Juno, I see Dana Frecker Duty is on the call today, and she works at Juno. And Juno is a vision and values software company that connects and educates people on a single destination platform for events and year-round community. They offer virtual event streaming, hybrid events, learning management, community forums, one-on-one chats, gamification, engagement suites, and even credentialing, all on one online venue. Plus, they also have a native companion app. So learn more about consolidating your tech into Juno at junolive.com/CISO. So today we have the pleasure of being joined by Adam Ford. He joined Clarion Events in June 2018. He's actually the COO. You know, in the trade show industry, not everybody has a CTO, and Clarion he fulfills that role at Clarion. He's led to improvements to group operations, enabled customer-focused value creation, and drives high-performance culture across Clarion. Over the last 25 years, Adam has worked across a range of industries, geographies, and scales of business with extensive experience in driving revenue and profit growth across startups and multinationals. Most recently, Adam was the group commercial director at RX, responsible for strategy, M&A, and sales and marketing excellence. So welcome, Adam.
Well, thank you, Danica. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So why don't you give our audience some context about Clarion and some of the biggest events that you work on?
Sure. So how I like to think about Clarion is we have effectively a third of our business in the US, a third of our business in the UK, Europe, primarily in the UK, and a third of our business in Asia. And across that, we operate in broadly 10 sectors. So quite diverse in terms of geography, quite diverse in terms of sectors. And some of the larger events that we run in the US, for example, would be InsurTech. That was an acquisition we made a couple of years ago. We run, which is happening, I think, in January, towards the end of January, DTech and PowerGen in the energy industry. Here in the UK, we operate a number of events in the retail sector, in Europe, energy again, and in Asia, we have a wide variety of events that we run. So I'll give you a little bit of background on myself, just so people can clarify about what my role is within Clarion. So I am the Chief Operating Officer. Technology does fall under my remit, but so does HR, so does sales enablement and sales operations, and so does marketing operations. So my job is around how do I help support our commercial teams, accelerate value delivery into customers. And so the reason we don't have a CTO necessarily now is because of the bridging that I effectively do between that commercial side and the technology side. So I have people within the technology function that obviously are very experienced and deep technologists. But my job is to kind of bridge kind of strategy with that technical execution.
Great. Thank you, Adam. I just was reading an article not too long ago in the Wall Street Journal talking about how, most people are moving away from that siloed CTO kind of role, and that, it does, your duties go across different business sectors within your own company. So that kind of goes with the trend, it seems like. Okay, so I have 5 questions for Adam, and then I also am going to open it up to Q&A at the end. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat, and we will try to get to them at the end in the last 5 to 10 minutes. So I'm going to kick it off by asking about how your organization is handling data ownership when you're working with event tech companies.
It's a great question, Danica. I think it's quite a popular one at the moment, particularly in the last 6 months. If I think back when I was, my previous job was at Reed Exhibitions, and where I got really interested in data was, it must have been 2014, where I had an interest in event tech, and I spent a lot of time speaking to startups. And I remember receiving one, I guess, investment pack. And what surprised me most about this company was the way it was framing itself to investors was it was a data company, not an event tech company. And it was that sort of light bulb moment when you're like, okay, so there are companies that are coming into our sector that are looking at solving problems and actually accumulating a lot of data that could be competitive to us. So it was just interesting that was kind of that pivotal moment for me. So when I came to Clarion, it was obviously an area of focus. And when we spent some time working with different customer engagement platforms, we would be very mindful of what the handling of that data could be. Who's the processor? Who is the controller? Where does that ownership lie? And I would say the last 12 months, that has just accelerated, because not only it used to be more enterprise deals that I would do maybe centrally, but now with our event teams looking at how to engage customers digitally throughout the year, they're also making some, they want to have their own decision making. They want to use different platforms. And I think that has been one of the biggest shift, is how do we start to communicate to our commercial teams, hey, look, just don't sign, you can't sign anything, because there are some more complex regulatory and legal frameworks that we need to be thinking through. But in addition to that, we absolutely are really focused on ensuring that the data ownership around our customers' behavior, their participation in these platforms, are protected in a way that we get the control of that data, and then we can provide that experience to our customers in a way that is controlled and is controlled and within our purview.
Okay, I keep putting it on mute. I'm sorry, everyone. My dogs are outside barking. So I have a little bit of a delay. These are the joys of doing webinars live, right? Okay, so tell us a little bit about what's in your tech stack and what you've added recently. I think that our audience would be interested to find that out.
Sure. At Clarion, we probably have a relatively straightforward approach, which is we tend to buy, not build. And so our tech stack consists primarily of third-party SaaS software, that Salesforce, Pardot, Workday, and most recently we've implemented a customer data platform. And now that customer data platform is called Treasure Data. It allows us to, for at least our initial focus has been around visitors. And so how do we accumulate all of that behavioral data, declared data, insight, and how do we unify and put that to an individual like myself, so that we can see them much more clearly. And so we started that program probably in Q2. We launched that piece of software in Q3, and trained the whole company up within all the marketeers primarily within about 6 weeks. And really now the last about 3 months, we've been sort of getting our teams used to using and seeing data in a much different way.
So maybe for some of the other people who are on here, what are some, lessons that you learned along the way, and how have you been able to, train your staff? I mean, what are some of the things that stand out there?
Well, what I think very differently we how we went into this was we actually started and we engaged the commercial teams right up front. So this wasn't I don't think this, again, this is where my role is maybe a little bit different than a CTO. Was my focus was on business outcomes. So I was, we spent a lot of time with the marketing cohort saying, okay, what are those use cases? What could we use data for? What are you trying to improve from a marketing perspective? And then we work backwards from that to prioritize. And I think, I can't remember, it was like 5 use cases we ended up prioritizing. And it was from that, then it was much simpler actually to roll out the new tools, the new tool. And we did it in certain ways where we did it in increments. So our largest set of data actually resides in our marketing automation tool system, which is Pardot. So in fact, we ingested all that data into the customer data platform and provided access for all the marketeers in a very short period of time to use effectively segmentation, but at a much sort of more powerful segmentation engine than they previously had access to. So it's that sort of focus on that business outcome and then kind of working backwards to say, well, what do we need to do sort of as that MVP, that minimum viable product that we need to get into our marketeers' hands that allows them to take advantage of a new set of capability, but most importantly, get familiar with the tool, start to learn, and then we can start to iterate how we increase the functionality and the feature set that they would be exposed to.
Great. Wonderful. So when you look ahead to 2022, where are you going to be investing in technology? What are some of the things that you're going to be doing?
Um, it's a continuation as I just described. So we have implemented our CDP, but there's more features and functions we are going to be adding. So enhancements, let's call it that. I also think we will, and we are spending more money on data privacy and security. That's one area, almost putting the moat around our castle, make that a little deeper and the walls a little higher. So I think there's will be some investment in that area. But also I think, and I don't have very specific plans on this, but I know it's an area that we're going to be exploring, is going to be around how do we create more seamless journeys for our customers as they interact with webinars or customer engagement platforms or our own websites to events. There's this UX piece which I know is going to be important, which enables our customers to have a less disjointed experience. And I think now that's, again, focusing on the customer, making sure that our investments are quite directly linked to either providing more value or providing better experiences. So we tend to try to focus on that customer and work backwards. And that's just one area that I know that we need to spend some time thinking about and then some money addressing.
I think that's been a reoccurring theme already this week, talking a lot about, the customer experience and the customer journey and how you can use technology to enhance the physical event, and also, provide digital experiences that are, that your customers want.
Exactly. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think that's, I was at an event, UFI event in Rotterdam about a month ago, and it was just really interesting to think to hear a lot of people talking about the sort of that orientation around customer and experience. And I think it's incumbent upon us in the industry to not lose sight of that, because sure, it's great to get back to running a live events, and maybe it's getting a little bit bumpy here in the UK, but we're definitely back on that trend of running live events. But there's so much more we can do, and technology will help us inform how we design our live events, to how do we design our digital events or digital engagements, to digital products. And it's really, I think it's an exciting moment for our industry where if we don't do it, our customers are going to vote with their feet. I'm paranoid about actually making sure that we do double down, we do invest in that experience and those outcomes because our customers' expectations have changed, like we all probably have experienced, in terms of expectations changing. They're changing, the demand for ROI is higher. And so we just have to be really mindful that this really pinpointing, because obviously all of us are we're not running the same amount of events, we don't have the same amount of cash. So how do we really focus and prioritize our investments within technology to really scale up and enhance those customer experiences and outcomes?
Yeah, there's been some talk earlier this week about matchmaking technology and then AI. So maybe tell us a little bit about what your strategy there at Clarion. I know you're doing some things in terms of matchmaking and have been doing some things.
Yeah, how we approach it is, I would say, two ways. One is, I would say, it's an old-fashioned way, but it's you phone people up and you actually do an interview with them. You really understand the buy side, what it is they're trying to achieve, and then you match them a really curated match with a supplier that has the product or the services that individual is looking for. So we do have a business, and some of our businesses operate like that. And I think to do that at scale using technology is going to be hard to replicate. I think a version of that, it's not hard to replicate, as I just don't think the level of curation is going to be as tight, if you want, in terms of those matchings. But there's still value. So it's almost like this cascade from that really, really deep understanding, which I think for at least for a period of time will be done manually. And then as you sort of go down that sort of almost pyramid, if we get to that bottom of that pyramid, that matching could be around content, it could be around product, but it's not as curated, and it's not as in depth. And I think that's where technology plays a significant role. And yes, we do. So we use some industry. We have what do we have? We've got 3, I think, or 4 different platforms that we use for matchmaking.
Great. Wonderful. Okay, so talk a little bit about how M&As on the tech vendor side might impact integration and implementation with your current tech stack, and kind of maybe what some of the challenges are there, and what your expectations are into 2022.
Well, I think consolidation will happen. It's almost inevitable. There's been a huge amount of money that's come into event tech, and there will be, and you can see it now, there's sort of companies that are sort of emerging with large investments, and they are buying, they're, rather than building, they're buying capabilities in to sort of round out their offering. So I think that's going to happen. I think so. That's one dynamic. The other dynamic is that they're chasing often the same business. So I think that the market is expanded for digital engagement, but if you look at the breadth of the companies and the number of companies now, I'm not convinced that they're all going to be able to be growing at the pace they need to be growing in order to satisfy their investors. So as a result, again, you'll see that consolidation, I think, happening. So it's hard. It's a little bit hard to predict what's going to happen. And so my advice really, and this is what we've been trying to do, is just stay really close to your partners. And, are you starting to see some red flags? Are they, is there fewer people that they provide, and are service levels dropping? Are you seeing some signals that starting to suggest that money and cash is maybe a little bit tighter? And, it is a little bit noisy right now because of, everyone's feeling, I think, the impacts of the last 20 months. But there's also, I think, if you're close to your suppliers and partners, sometimes just an honest conversation is what you need to be having with them. So, and why that's important is because, it's not a small piece of work. It's not a massive, but it's not a small piece of work to integrate these businesses, and particularly as you start to add in the data flows, as I mentioned, across different platforms, your sales platform, your marketing platform, and your customer data platform. You don't want to be doing those, 20 times a year. So I think it's I think it's going to be interesting. It's going to be sort of what shakes out. And that leads back to the first question you asked me, which is around that data ownership piece. And if these companies are being consolidated, they're going to be larger. They're going to carry more power. And I think we just have to be mindful as we go into that period of consolidation, what sort of behavioral change are we going to see. So we might have some companies now that are quite open to having quite flexible data ownership discussions, i.e. organizer owns it. I think the next and the big area, and there's a focus for me, is what happens around the anonymized data. How do you take, not only is the data sets that we build are valuable, but I think rapidly increasing in terms of value creation is the algorithms and the machine learning that happens on the top of that. And so really having a deep understanding of how your partners use that data, building up, sort of a training set across all of their customers, even though it's anonymized, how that data then gets used to drive value for them. So it's just something I think we all need to be mindful of.
Have you seen some ways that you are working with partners in terms of that anonymized data to, make decisions and change things, with your technology or, different processes based on some of that anonymized data across many events?
I think it's really sort of new, Danica. I knew this was important before, but I just didn't spend as much time. Now I'm spending quite a bit of time on it. It's some simple things. Can someone explain and write it down in the contract how you actually use anonymized data? So, speak to their data scientists and say, and effectively add it as a schedule to your contract. Because if that's, and I have a hypothesis, others may have different ones, but my hypothesis is that algorithm will be increasingly important. I want to know where the value gets created from the data that I provide into it. Then I can choose. I can choose to work with that partner if I think that value creation is bounded by, and there's different ways that you can do that, versus unbounded, where I might say at some point, actually, I feel really uncomfortable with that. I need to find another partner.
Yeah. Okay, great. I know that you probably have many tech strategies for 2022, but maybe talk about one or two of your most important ones that come to mind. I know you said you're going to be working on some strategy for the next couple of weeks in your downtime, right? So, what are some of those things that you're excited about doing for 2022?
I think I alluded to it when we asked about the investments. So that would be enhancements in the customer data platform. It would be looking at those supporting those customer journeys to be more seamless across sort of that omni-channel interaction. But I think above all, because these are just tools, systems, and business process, it's the culture. So where I'm going to be spending, and I know my senior leadership colleagues are also going to be spending, is how do we start to embed a different way of working, a different way of thinking across the organization, that people utilize data in a different way in their everyday job. How do they think about marketing differently? How do you think about the go-to-market strategy differently for sales, for example? How do we take customer insight and drive product design, not once a year, but how do we do this at a much more regular cadence? So it's one of the things that I don't worry about, but I'm very sort of acutely attuned to, is that we've effectively changed kind of the operating cadence, clock speed of our business, because historically, if you work in a larger sort of company that runs trade shows, it's a very episodic type of workflow. And if you think about the addition of digital engagement, now whether those are moments in time events or more of a continuous engagement with customers, your ability to learn and to iterate is much faster. But that takes a different way of working and takes a different way of thinking. Sometimes it takes a different way of how do you organize yourself, how do you create learning across teams, because historically I think that's been very difficult for particularly large organizers. So it was maybe not the top tech strategy, but it's definitely the business strategy, which I think once we've embedded different technology, we really have to spend time on that cultural piece.
Yeah. Have you found some things that are working or things that you want to try there in order to make that more part of your culture? I mean, I think that's an issue for all show organizers that it has been an episodic, workflow for most
Yep.
show organizers over the past. And the idea that you can, iterate and change things so quickly in the digital environment and thinking that way. So have you had any experience with things that are working yet in that regard?
Yeah, I think part of it is you need to have people with the capability, first of all, to help provide insight, because otherwise it feels a bit overwhelming. I mean, there's a huge amount of data that you can access. So part of it is getting different individuals, and I don't mean data scientists. I mean, specifically think people who are strong sort of data marketeers, for example, who can really help interpret some of the customer data and then provide insight into their other marketing colleagues and event directors, for example. So it's not earth shattering. It doesn't, and it's not. The other thing is that as senior leaders within Clarion, we talk about customers all the time, right? So when we talk to teams, we're not just talking about their financials, but we also talk about, okay, what are you learning about your customers? And our commercial teams are now acutely aware that that is really important. And we've also changed the vision of the company. Used to be something along the lines of we want to be a fast-growing industry partner. And now we want to have products that are market leading in terms of customer satisfaction and delight. So we've reorientated our vision around the customer. So it's not just one thing, Danica. I think it's a series of, right from, what do you stand for, what do senior leadership talk about, to putting the right tools in place, to getting people who know how to use those tools really effectively. And then what we're hoping, and I believe we will, is that starts to build out and infuse, and people become more curious, they can ask more questions, and they can really start to see the power of data and insight, and then how that can drive their own success, whether they're in sales or marketing or running events.
Wonderful. Okay, well, we are almost at our time here, and I didn't have any questions, so that's good. We covered everything, and I want to thank Adam for sharing his time and experience with the rest of you on the call today. And I hope you gained some good insights on what his tech strategies are and how you might be able to implement some of those at your own organization. So thank you so much, Adam, for joining us today.
Thank you.
And
Thanks everyone for your time.
yeah, we look forward to seeing everybody tomorrow for our next iteration of the CTO series. So thank you. Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
Danica. Bye.